Now, we've got threats and opportunities. We've talked a lot about opportunities for people. There are some threats around, and I consider the next presentation to sort of lance the boil that is extended producer responsibility, and a little bit more information about the plastic packaging tax. So somebody known to all of you, Andy Barnetson from the Confederation of Paper Industries. Thank you very much.
I don't know if there are any Monty Python fans in the audience, but I was a great fan, and John Cleese used to say, and now for something completely different. So bear with me. I too don't have military experience, but what I hope I can bring is passion. Right or wrong, I have a passion for cardboard boxes, and I've spent 18 years following the legislation and all the trends. So there is a great deal that I'd like to tell you. Tim's given me 10 minutes, I may be a bit longer, apologies for that. There's a lot of detail in the slides which I won't have time to cover, but happy to pass those on to you. And always available for questions. I am here later, come find me in the bar. I'm going to start with plastics packaging tax because this is the easy one. If you're not aware already, plastic packaging tax came into effect in April this year, 1st of April. Right now, if you manufacture or import any plastic packaging goods, then you are liable for a tax of £200 per tonne unless you have 30% recycled content. Must have 30% recycled content or it's £200 a tonne. The good news is that as a conventional sheet plant, that should not apply to you. It applies when plastic is more than 50% by weight, so I assume that most of your boxes, or all of your boxes, would not apply. If you're making plastics goods for some reason, and that may be true of someone in the room, then you may have a different position, but for conventional corrugated, it does not apply. Ancillary equipment, your strapping, your film and so on, that's a different matter, but that should be handled by your supplier. There will be a fee that your supplier's paying unless there's 30% recycled content. That'll come to you in the invoices and presumably be passed on. So the good news is plastics packaging tax probably doesn't apply, and if you're a conventional sheet plant, it should not be an issue. There is a problem for some food packaging. My colleagues in the carton board industry, when they're making sandwich packs, some pizza boxes, quiche boxes, that sort of thing, if there's a plastic window, then HMRC in their wisdom say the plastic window is something different and you must pay the tax on that window regardless of the rest of the package. So hopefully there's a summary. It shouldn't be an issue as conventional corrugated. There's the legalese. I'm not going to go through it. Again, it will be in the slides if you want to get a copy of them. There are the details. That's what you've got to do and by when. But hopefully it doesn't apply as a primary producer. So I'll move on to something else which is going to affect you. EPR is extended producer responsibility. If you haven't heard that term before, then you will. At the moment, as I'm sure you're all aware, we have the packaging recovery notes, we have PRNs, and that's a pretty simple system and a pretty cheap system, which enables us to meet some pretty minor requirements. What EPR does, understandably from the title, extended producer responsibility, it puts more responsibility on industry. The good news is that's mostly going to be on your customers. It's the producers, it's the people that put something in a box rather than that make a box who really carry the can. I'll come back to that. At the moment, we have a number of consultations. First of all, there's EPR. We have heard about that. Response published March of this year. We're waiting on responses for the deposit return scheme and the consistency of collections. Deposit return scheme, don't worry about that. All of us will see it as consumers when we buy a can of beer, glass of wine. Why do I start with alcohol? Or beans, whatever it is. There will be probably 20, 50 pence, something like that on the bottle or the can, which we will pay at point of sale, and then we will get back when we return it, either to a physical return unit or with some app on the phone when we put it into curbside. We will pay something, we will get it back. We will see that as consumers, but as manufacturers of boxes, this will not affect you. This is glass bottles, this is tin cans, this is plastic bottles, that sort of thing. In their wisdom, Scotland is going ahead sooner. I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or bad. It's possible that England will learn from Scottish experience, It's possible that we won't. But that's DRS, not a primary issue for you. Consistency of collections, however, is going to determine what is collected at curbside. This is government saying to all the local authorities, all of you will collect these materials. You will do it together or you do it separately. You will do it in a bin that is this colour or you won't. That consistency could shake up everything we do at home and could shake up the whole recycling process. Appreciate most of you aren't directly involved in recycling, but it all goes to the quality of the material that comes through the system, to your sheet feeders. It goes to our reputation as an industry. If we can convince government that separate collection for paper packaging is a good thing, which it is, because it gives us better quality, enables us to get to a higher recycling rate, our reputation improves. And I'm coming back to speak to you after coffee as well, hopefully on a slightly lighter note. At that point, I'll talk more about reputation and what we're doing to promote the industry. As we go through all these changes, reputation really is everything. One point I'll make, extended producer responsibility really is just about who pays. It doesn't really say very much. I've mentioned the 89% recycling rate, which we're wondering whether we can achieve. But basically it just says instead of councils paying for our curbside collection, industry will pay for it. And that's the best part of £2 billion, which your customers will be paying instead of it coming out of council tax. It's a chance for government to lose £2 billion out of their coffers and charge it to someone else. We've had long delays on all of this. We've been waiting and waiting for consistency of collection. DEFRA keeps telling us it's going to be soon, and obviously in recent circumstances it has been delayed. We frankly don't know when we're going to hear about consistency of collections, and there is no way, in my opinion, that this thing will not be delayed. Whatever targets you might read in the press about when it's all going to come in, I don't believe it any longer, not for a second. It must be delayed, because there's no way DEFRA can meet the targets that they're facing. On top of everything else, you may have heard that the PRN system, this is the packaging recovery notes we have now, that is going to continue for a period of time. It will be for some of the system. We're trying to iron out how it's going to work and for how long. So you will now have the PRN system for a bit longer than we would have done. The EPR is going to be alongside PRN and not instead of. So that's another consultation which we've had to face. Again, this is a massive change. It's going to affect all of you, if only because your customers are going to need to know what's going on. It will help if you can tell them a bit about EPR. Primarily, it is not going to be falling on you. What does it mean? That your customers, the producers, are going to have to pay for local authority collection. Every time you and I put something in the curbside collection bin, currently council pays for it. They physically collect, they pay, and in the longer term, that will be reimbursed by the scheme administrator, who will take its money from producers, from your customers. Current PRN system is around about 100 to 150 million across the entire country for all materials. That's going to rise to something like 2 billion, and that's DEFRA's figure. We can see it being at least 2.5, possibly £3 billion cost to your customers. So local authorities are going to go to a central body called Scheme Administrator and say, we've paid this much last quarter, whatever the period is. We want our money back for the collection. And Scheme Administrator's job will be to pay for it. Scheme Administrator's job will also be to collect the money in from all of your customers. Part of the problem, and the reason I say this is going to be delayed, is because Scheme Administrator, a single body, is going to be handling this £2 billion from your customers. And you know better than I do. How do you set up a company that's going to take in £2 billion of industry money and farm it out to however many hundreds of local authorities there are? How big a job is that? It's probably going to be a FTSE 250 equivalent. It's going to be a big company, at least handling £2 billion of industry money. And how many people do you employ? What sort of plans do you put into place? Oh, and by the way, can we do it by August next year? I'd guess no, but government in their wisdom still seems to think they can do it. And oh, by the way, we don't want private industry help, thank you very much. It doesn't matter that you're the guys that are actually good at this. We're going to do it in government. So this scheme administrator is now going to be probably a subset of either DEFRA or the Environment Agency. No chance. Another element of all of this, which we still haven't heard anything about, is the modulated fees, the idea that the more recyclable your product is, the less the fee will be. So in theory, your customer chooses a cardboard box, they pay less per unit than if they were putting it into plastic, because plastic is not so recyclable. It sounds like somewhere where we should win. but we can't trust it. We don't know for certain. DEFRA is very good at throwing in targets. What happens when they say, well, you've got to reach a 90% recycling rate in cardboard to be considered good enough, and plastics, well, as long as they get to 35%, they'll be good enough. We might be measured against a completely different target. We just don't know. So what does it mean for you? That was all background to what it is. The biggest issue for you is watch out if you have customers who turn over less than £1 million. As it stands, I've just said that your customers will pick up the obligation, the financial responsibility, however much that is. If your customer has a turnover of less than £1 million, and that's turnover, not the packaging spend, then as it stands, we understand that you, the converter, will pick up the responsibility. So one thing that you might want to think about for Sheep Plant Association, Tim, is some sort of guide to what this means if we have customers, and I'm happy to help on another occasion. And finally, on EP. How to police it?
How do we know?
Good question, and perhaps DEFRA hasn't thought that through. I don't know what the answer is yet. Yeah, I'm afraid there is. There's lots of long list, and this is me in actually quite an informed position, believe it or not. I should perhaps say better it's something that DEFRA doesn't know. The moment DEFRA tells us how to police it, we will tell you. I don't know. Will there be some sort of directory of companies turning over less than £1 million that you have to go to? Possibly. Will you have to ask the question of your customers? Possibly. We wait and see. That would be a nice solution for us, wouldn't it? Would it be their responsibility? I fear probably not. Government likes to make it whoever's paying the money. Yes. Would it be the customers? Yes. I think I understand the question. Will it be the customer's responsibility to tell you that their turnover is less than £1 million? Well, that would make it easier for us, the sheep plant industry. But I rather fear that government will put the responsibility onto you to chase it down. That seems to be their sort of standard way of operating, sadly.
Who came up with the idea of that £1 million?
Someone in DEFRA. Yeah, it could have been 2 million, it could have been £500,000. Yeah. In all of this, as you'll gather, the way a consultation works is government says this is what we propose to do. Do you have any ideas? And we get all our thoughts together and we go back and say, well, this is wrong because, and we could do it better like this. And typically they completely ignore us and go ahead, but they've consulted us. So we are constantly fighting with government. If I had time, and if you want to talk about it over a beer later, just today I've signed off a letter we're co-signing a letter from the Food and Drink Federation to the new Chancellor, to the other government ministers saying, you're not talking to us and we are the ones who actually know what we're doing here. So there's a complete lack of communication from them, sadly. Anyway, sorry, I must move on. The one last thing I wanted to mention in relation to EPR is that all packaging will be labelled recycle or do not recycle. You can see the dates when it comes in. Once again, plastic film gets a bit of an easy ride. They have an extra year. But there will come a point where all your boxes will have to have a logo on, recycle or do not recycle, and presumably it will always be recycle for corrugated. What shape will that logo take? Is it going to be the same as we have now? Who knows? But for the first time, we'll have a mandatory label. A lot of your customers, or customers of the packaging industry, perhaps the bigger brands, the Unilevers, the Coca-Colas, are putting on the recycle swoosh, the circular arrow with a heart-shaped arrowhead. You may have seen that, and that can be very variable. Recycle, don't recycle, check local facilities, do not recycle at home, recycle with this bit but not that bit. Government's trying to standardise this. Presumably we'll be okay in all of this, but we can't assume anything. In preparation for that, CPI, Confederation of Paper Industries, has produced recyclability guidelines, freely available on our website, and I can provide the link if you need it. If a customer says, I want to design a pack, how do I know if it's going to be recyclable? These are our guidelines that say, this is what we'd like you to follow. Maximum amount of plastic, choice of inks, choice of adhesives. Okay? If you want to read through that so you can think about the adhesives and the inks that you're using, please do. That recyclability guideline, if you can see it past me, that's all on the website. That's if you're going to produce something and you want to know if it's likely to be recyclable. We also now have launched, just within the last fortnight, CPI also now has paper cycle, on our website, paper.org.uk/papercycle, and that's an online assessment tool. If you have an existing piece of packaging and want to know if it's likely to be acceptable for recycling by the existing recycling industry, go through this online tool, and we will give you a yes or a no, or please submit for testing. Given that government is going to require a logo, we're trying to get there first and say, well, we are the ones, we are the body, we're the organisation to say yes or no. And again, this is all very topical. Just this morning I got an email from DEFRA saying we'd like to know if there's anybody out there who could conceivably design a recyclability assessment methodology. So I spoke to my colleagues and say we've got to go back to them and say, well, guess what? We've already done it. Sad thing is, DEFRA in their wisdom may not accept us as the voice of paper recycling. Well, who are we? Confederation of Paper Industry. We only represent every paper recycling company in the country, and if not us, then who? But sadly, it's not that simple. Paper Cycle, that's us. You can't quite see it behind me, but paper.org.uk/papercycle. So if you want to have a look at that, there is a fee to take part in that, so it may not be as easy as just going through, but there are a lot of FAQs, lots of information on the website that you can look through if you want to know the sort of thing we're saying about recyclability. I threw a lot of slides together end of last week because someone was chasing me. So I can't remember what's coming next, actually. Yes. Another thing that's coming, and you need to be aware of this, it's not legislative yet, but it's becoming very popular. Reusable must be better than recyclable. It's not up for debate. It must be true. Says who? We are seeing a real appetite across European legislation, and also in the UK. There is the review of the Packaging Waste Directive, which won't directly affect us now that we're out of the EU, but it is likely that Brussels is going to say we need certain minimum levels of reusable packaging. Why? Who says reusable is better? We all think it is, and in some cases it may be, but we're chasing targets without understanding the science. I'll jump ahead to the Spanish Royal Decree before I come back to the middle point. Spain has got national legislation proposed, and if it goes through, I think next year, then you can see the targets here. The proportion of commercial and reusable industrial packaging shall be 20% by 2030. So Spain is saying within Spain, you must have a minimum of 20% reusable packaging in the transport supply secondary packaging chain. Why 20%? Who says that's best? Doesn't matter. That's what the Spanish government has said. And coming back to the middle point, as you can see there, I was speaking to the lead for packaging for a very major supermarket in this country, and they said to me, as you can see, well, the price of corrugated going up, the business case for reusables gets better. Well, you are, of course, entitled to your prerogative, your decision. It's your prerogative to make a commercial decision. You must make a commercial decision, sir, on whatever you decide, but don't pretend that's an environmental decision. You make a business case for whatever you choose to do, and I can't affect that, but don't tell me that's being done for environmental reasons, which is often the next step. And now, in preparation for this, you've heard me talk about FEFCO before. If you're not aware, FEFCO is the European Association for Corrugated. We, CPI, are part of FEFCO. I go out to their meetings and hear from my colleagues what's going on. And FEFCO had a project running, and that's to look at reuse versus recycling. We are not saying that recyclable is always better, but we are saying reuse is not always better. They did this study, and if you can see down the sides, life cycle analysis study, hotspot analysis, so which of these are most important, and then what's called a white paper just to bring it all together in a press releaseable form. And very briefly, 15 categories that we compared reusable plastics with corrugated, and in 10 of them, corrugated came out better, including things like climate change. In this study, corrugated is better, no question. And the problem with life cycle analysis studies, if you happen to know anything about it, is you tend to spend a very large amount of money looking at a very detailed case. And you then know everything there is about a very detailed case. And the plastics industry comes along and says, yeah, but what about? So we did sensitivity analyses. We looked at a range of different options. Well, what happens if we go here? What happens if we go there? I don't remember if I have a slide on that. No. But in the sensitivity analyses, you say, well, we've considered an 80% recycling rate for corrugated and a 45% recycling rate for plastics. What happens if we drop ours to 60 and raise theirs to 60? Hypothetical case. That's a sensitivity analysis. You change something. We did that, and in all the sensitivity analyses, perhaps bar one, we still came out on top. So this study says we're not saying that recyclable is better, but we are saying reusable is not better. And that sort of information is going to be very, very important in the next few months, in the next year or two, as government tells us that reusable is best. One last slide on that life cycle assessment study, which FEFCO did. The whole point about reusable plastic crates is it's better because you reuse them a lot of times. This study showed that for a reusable crate to be better than recyclable corrugated, it has to be used 63 times. We understand that typical is 24 cycles around the system. So these trays are not being used as often as they should be to get the benefits that are claimed. So that's it. Rapid fire through all of this: EPR, plastics packaging tax, and the new area of facing reusable packaging. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I am around this evening in the bar and over dinner if you've got questions. Tim, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I can't. Well, I don't know how to follow that, other than it seems a little bit peculiar. Clearly, councils' roles are going to change. And I don't know how this is, but for the last 8 years in Shropshire, we've been diligently separating and cleaning all our different recyclables and putting them in different buckets, different bags, and we leave them out there, and some are collected, some aren't. Now we've been told to chuck it all in one black bin. How does that reconcile itself with consistency of collection and recycling? Clearly, the whole supply chain, or the whole of recycling, is going to change. The structure of it has to change, because we've been doing the separation and made it nice and easy, and they failed. And now they appear in our county to be chucking it all together. How's that going to help?
Separation is a good thing. It sounds like a local decision to put everything together. That's a bad thing from the recycling point of view. Consistency of collection should tell all councils, no, this is the way you're going to do it in future.
Yeah, so it's probably all going to change again. So I won't be buying a bin, let's put it that way, or applying for one. Yes. Well, I think Neil's mentioned in the past that perhaps buying shares in these recycling companies might be a good idea. So, yes, indeed.